Hi, how are you?
Hello. Yeah, hi. We'll just ask Anshuli to join and we'll begin in 2 minutes.
I think there's a few people who are beginning to join, so maybe you could just set some context already for them.
Yeah, I think she's here. Yeah.
Hello.
Okay,
Good
let's
evening,
begin.
everyone. I'm Anshuli. Currently, I am in my third year of MBBS and I am pursuing my degree from Vardha, Maharashtra. Also, here with me, I have Dr. Nidhi Joshi and also have with us Dr. Miss Artika. I'm I'm currently a volunteer at Healthy Women's Tribe, which is founded by Mr. V. Modi. Here at this platform, we share information regarding women's health and hygiene in covering all the like important issues uh, faced by the women. Have with me, like,
I think there's a little bit of a disturbance on her part. Can you just check that?
Yeah, I think your connection is poor, Anshuli. Just check it once.
Nidhi, I would like to welcome our guest, Miss Artika.
Yeah. Hello, Artika. We welcome you for this session and we're honored to have you here. And I would quickly like to introduce Ms. Artika to the audience. So, Artika is an award-winning sexual and menstrual health educator with over 5 years of experience. She holds a degree in public health and gender. She is also the founder of Taarini Foundation, a non-profit working in the area of SRHR, sustainable menstruation and menstrual health education. She is currently working on community projects at Allo Health, India's first sexual health digital team. So we welcome you, Tarini, and we'd love to have you answer a few questions for us and make the topic clear to our audience about the hymen
Okay, yeah, we
and
can just start
virginity.
off.
So I like to ask, yeah, great. So I request Anshuli to start with
Very
the
first
first question.
question, ma'am. Is hymen same in every woman? And also, and is there a possibility that a girl is born without hymen?
Can't hear the question properly.
Am I on?
Can you repeat it?
Is
There's
hymen
a disturbance.
same in every girl or every woman? And is there a possibility that a girl is born without one?
Right. So I think just to agender this, that a hymen would be present where, right? Like that's where the question is, that where is the hymen? So the organ, which is basically the vagina, is where the hymen is. So the hymen is actually a thin membrane of skin which covers the opening of the vagina, right? So anybody of people of any gender that have a vagina, there is a chance that they will have a hymen. Now, in itself, hymen can be of many types. And I think we'll go a little bit more into it when we talk more in terms of what people assume is virginity and why that's not correct. But the hymen is like a curtain. So, you know how you can draw curtains apart? Just in the same way, the skin of the hymen can be drawn apart into different sides. And the little space in the middle is where multiple functions happen through. So that thing is called a perforation. Perforation is a word in general which means a hole. So there's a little perforation on a hymen, and this is like an anatomically typical hymen. So when I say anatomically typical, this is what your medical books will have, and this is what like mainstream media will show. But the truth of it is that hymen can be of many different kinds. So perforation in itself can be different for different people. And perforation in certain cases may not be there at all, in which case you need to go through a surgery for normal physiological functions to come back to normal. In terms of not being born with a hymen at all, those are the certain cases that we talk about. It probably wouldn't be right to say that they're rare cases. I would just say they're underreported cases. So whenever we talk in mainstream medical science or mainstream media as well, we talk about a very specific type of hymen which exists while not acknowledging the various different types of other types of hymens that can exist. And I think that happens in sexual health a lot. Like we all tend to acknowledge only one type of sex as sex when there are so many different types of sexes. So I think whatever sort of is majorly reported is what is acknowledged, and the rest is not. And I think that's the case with the hymen.
Okay. So thank you. So my next question for you is, what is the purpose of the hymen, and does its absence or presence have any significance on the reproductive health of
So
a woman?
a lot of the things and a lot of the organs in our body have different smaller, bigger functions, and the absence and presence can affect, sort of hormonal functions as well, and some of the physiological functions. So, for example, when I was talking about there being no perforation on the hymen at all, or let's say the hymen not being there at all, or the perforation being larger, that can affect the flow of material from the vagina itself, right? So, for example, people with non-perforated hymen sometimes need to go through a surgery because menstrual blood also needs a place to pass out of. And so when there is a perforation in the hymen, that's where the menstrual blood comes out from. So if there is no perforation, there is no way for that blood to come out. If that blood doesn't come out, that in return affects, a chain of events gets set in motion. So definitely the function is there. At the same time, this is also to say that the perforation itself and the vaginal hymen itself is a very flexible piece of skin. So it actually makes space anytime there's insertion or anything exiting from the outside. So even when we talk about vaginal childbirth, so people who choose to give birth to children through the vaginal route, the hymen does make space for that to come out as well. So again, these are the two major physiological processes.
Very truly said, ma'am. This like there is so much of anatomical misunderstanding which is going in like in the public. Like women have indulged themselves to fear. That's the reason why girls are like afraid of ruining themselves, either through sports or playing or tampon use or any sexual activity. So they're like this is skirting their opportunities and also their freedom. And it's like high time that we should put an end to the virginity fraud, like what's going in the market, we could say. And it's time to break the myth. So it's like really an important session that we are going to going through. Also, people seem to believe that hymen is same like kind of is like some kind of a seal or a covering to the vaginal opening, like, but it is like a vaginal membrane with its like so yeah. So hymen is more like a scrunchy or a rubber kind of a material. Like it's not plastic which can be torn off. So going through the third question, which you already explained, like how the blood flows through the hymen. Coming towards the next question, like ma'am, hymen rupture. Like what are the possible ways for it to be ruptured?
Right. So again, whenever we talk about hymen rupture, we specifically talk about an already perforated hymen, right? Because that's kind of like a default assumption that people make. It's not correct, but it is the default assumption that people make. And like we just talked about, that's why I wanted to give the curtain example. That rather than being like a film of something that can be broken, it's like a flexible curtain. So you know how a curtain can be drawn apart, just like that the hymen membrane can actually be very flexible and moves apart to create space for different physiological processes. So when we talk about rupturing as well, actually there is no rupture per se. What happens is that the like if this is the curtain, it's together, and how it moves apart is what can cause bleeding. So people assume that it's a rupture because if they see blood, they're like something must have been hurt or torn off, and that's why they call it a rupture. But actually, the membrane is just moving apart to create space for something. So, let's say if we're talking about vaginal penetration, whether it's during sex with the penis and penetration with the penis, or for some people, sometimes also just insertion of hands and fingers or menstrual cups can lead to that rupturing effect, but it's actually not rupturing. The membranes are just moving apart to create something, space for something that's been inserted. So, depending from person to person, that moving apart of the membranes may be a physical trauma for some people. Maybe if their perforation is slightly lesser than other people. So, when you create space for that thing, bleeding happens. Maybe depending on the size of the thing that's being inserted, that bleeding can happen. But there's no rupturing per se. If rupturing actually happens, that means we're probably talking about a hymen which has not got perforation at all, in which case the rupturing will actually be a very, very painful experience as well.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So I'd like to ask you the next question regarding the same topic. So when we say, when people say rupture, so that means you said the membranes just move apart. So does it really cause pain in every woman, or some people don't even feel it, and some people like go through excess pain? And also, does absent hymen, or once if there is no hymen or there is no bleeding in the first intercourse, so does it mean that the woman is not a virgin? So that's one very
I think the point
controversial
we want to
topic.
emphasize on here is that virginity in itself is a social fact, and a hymen is a biological presence.
Yeah.
So the fact that the hymen exists, where it is, what are some of its functions, what are some of its types, all of these are biological facts. Like science can prove these exist, right? Like a doctor can also find them in a person's body. They have been found and studied like that. Virginity, on the other hand, is a social fact. So society believes that virginity is something that should exist and it should be defined in a certain way. So there's actually no biological fact per se to virginity. There's no A is equal to B in terms of virginity. It's something that people have imagined. Now, what people imagined and society decided to call virginity was that if the hymen is not broken, then a person is a virgin. And how the hymen will break is the first time they have penetrative sex. A few things happen here. First thing being that when we say that sex can be more than just of one type, then how can we define virginity with only one kind of sex? Then the second question comes that, okay, if somebody says, okay, you're a penetration virgin, in that case, the only way to judge, according to people who believe in the concept of virginity, is to see if there's bleeding after penetration or not. Now, for a lot of people, this training of the hymen, which is basically muscle, so this opening, closing training of the hymen can actually happen in many different ways. So, for example, it could be due to gymnastics. So, for example, their hymen already got stretched before penetration because of another activity like gymnastics or something like running, something like horseback riding, something like using a menstrual cup. So maybe they had their first bleeding that time and now they won't have it when penetration happens. So that doesn't mean that they've been penetrated into before. The second thing also being that for a lot of people this bleeding might not happen because each person's hymen is different. So maybe that hymen is already flexible enough for that penetration or for that physical activity. The third thing being, why is there even an interest in checking if anybody is bleeding, hymen is rupturing, not rupturing, virginity? Like, what is this public interest in knowing whether somebody bled after sex or not, right? Like, what is this obsession with wanting to know? So, firstly, there is no biological fact attached to it. Secondly, socially, I'm challenging even the need for the term to exist or the need for anybody to know about this, right? So I think a new term that a lot of people are now using and replacing, and is a much better term, again, it's nobody's business, is a sexual debut. So if you want to share with somebody when is the first time you had sex, again, it says any form of sex, right? Like uh, any form of sex other than penetration could be as pleasuresome for a person and it could be as daunting for a person and it could be as challenging as a person. So who are we to kind of be like, okay, penetration is sex and everything else is not? So in, given the scenario and given all of that, more and more the concept of virginity becomes useless. It becomes a little bit something that's disrespectful to people. And there are so many practices surrounding it which give it that power to become so disrespectful.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Coming to the next question, like it's very truly you explained like that whether the presence of hymen is a true determinant of virginity or not. So of course it is not.
Yeah.
Because that had been since like in the community it's like everyone would blame women that the bleeding game you told that if they don't
Right.
bleed at the first time they do the penetrative sex,
Yeah.
so they are said to be or they are meant to be like they're not meant to be a virgin.
Yeah.
So this thing has to be changed. So ma'am, what according to you is the right time to lose virginity? Is there any right time to lose?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, like through this medium, I would just want to completely challenge and remove the usage of words like virginity and terms like losing your virginity. What are you really losing? Right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
saying this is not even a fact, I'm saying this is imaginary. So, like, can I meet Santa Claus? Probably not, you know, because probably it doesn't exist. So, can I lose virginity? Probably not, because it's not even a fact to me. So, you know, just like re-emphasizing, if the question is what is the right time to have sex for the first time, that is something that I can probably take up as a
Yeah.
question and answer that
Yeah.
for sure. Talking about virginity and practices, definitely. There are a lot of Indian regional practices also where the bed sheet is taken from the room of a newly married couple to check for bleeding. So if there's blood stains,
Yeah.
then it's assumed that the marriage has been consummated.
Mhm.
Again, this in itself is wrong because you're literally pressurizing somebody who's gotten married that they must have sex at a given point of time because society thinks it's right and not because they want to have sex or they want to enjoy or they want to practice it. So there are lots of practices. There is a practice of hymen stitching, which is like if somebody has had sex and it's assumed that their hymen has stretched out, stitching it back makes them a virgin again. There is a belief that if your hymen is not ruptured, you know, putting it in quotation marks again, having explained what it is, then sex is not as good for you because now in some way your vagina has loosened up. Of course, all of these things are just misconceptions and myths and very rooted in patriarchy because they're trying to control the body of somebody who's a marginalized sex assigned at birth and you know in not in majority as well. Talking about what is the right time to have sex for the first time, I think I can talk about the legal age of consent in India being 18 years and the legal age as an adult being 18 years. Uh, for the POXO Act, which is the Prevention of Sexual Abuse Amongst Children, the age is 16. Having said all of that, I think it's that you know we live in a world where we do know publicly that a lot of people have sexual experiences before the age of 18 and before the age of 16 as well. So having said that, I think the few things which we talk about and sort of like checklist which you can check in with yourself, which can help you then decide if it's the right time for you or not, is to A, check for consent, we check for information. You have information, enough information that can help you have this particular act of sex, whatever it is. Information could mean things like what does it feel like, if you're sure, if you're not sure, are you scared, and is your fear something that is could become a reason for you to not go ahead with it? Do you know what kind of contraception you're using? Uh, do you know this person well enough? Do you think you trust this person? Are you comfortable with this person? So I don't think there's a right answer for what is the right time to have sex. You could be like 18 and know that this is the right person to go ahead with, and maybe you're 30 and you're not ready for it, and maybe you're 25 and you're not ready for it. So there's no right time to have sex per se, which I can answer for anybody. But we usually like tell people that if these are the questions you can answer for yourself, and at the end of answering those questions, feel like you still want to engage in this experience, then you know it's probably the right time for you. And like having said that, for a lot of people, it may feel like the right time, and they might afterwards realize that it wasn't the right time. And you know that's completely okay. You don't have to beat yourself up about it. Of course, if you feel like you've experienced some kind of trauma, whether it's emotional or physical, you should reach out to somebody for help and whenever you feel ready to do so. But yeah, there's no right time per se. There's a legal age, which I just shared.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. It's really rightly said that it's very subjective, the term virginity, and it's all given by the people itself. Also, especially in countries like India, there are horrendous crimes taking place against women based on this topic, where when they assume, you know, when their presumptive notions, like if the woman is not a virgin, if they just find out, and there is no confirmation for that, even if they may just presume it to be so, and then such things happen, and women in India are not yet empowered enough to speak up against it. So what message would you like to give the girls out there to when to say no and when to know whether this is not the right person, if he's asking you for such questions regarding your virginity and all that. So
Also because
what do
of
you think
this
would
thing,
you
also
like
because of
to tell
this
the
thing, like people are going into wrong practices nowadays. Like I heard about currently, like fake hymen blood capsules are also available in the market because it can be so dangerous for you that without any like without a thought, women are like purchasing that thing, inserting that into her vagina. Also, like it could be toxic. It could create what not. Like how
Yeah,
can you be so assured of something like a foreign body to insert it into your body?
yeah.
So because of
Um, yeah,
also, this is really making the women all over India very scared. They're just so scared with the consequences if somebody thinks that they're not a virgin, and what might happen to them, and that is why they end up doing all sorts of
right.
things which might actually be harmful for them.
Yeah,
So, would you like
sure.
to address
So
that?
obviously India is a patriarchal society, and there is one gender, and people who identify with that one gender who are um, kind of controlling in a big way. Of course, things have changed a lot from historical times, and people have more rights and agency, etc., and more education as well. But having said that, it's not like that vast a difference, right? Like people of marginalized genders are still marginalized, whether it's people who identify as women or people who identify as non-binary genders, some of whom may also have vaginas and hymens and uteruses and that body structure and that anatomy. And somehow, firstly, the concept of virginity should be challenged in itself. Like, why does that concept exist? Like, why do parents of people who are looking to get married want to know what their previous sexual experience has been like? Like, how is that information helping anybody? I feel like the only way that information helps anybody is if you're talking in terms of STI testing between partners. But somehow the burden of proving virginity is also on people with vaginas and people with hymens. The same concept is very much applicable in people with penises as well. There is just no way to tell. There is no way to tell in people with vaginas as well, but they made up some sort of a way, right? Like they said, okay, if it's bleeding, it's virginity, otherwise it's not. But why is the burden? Firstly, virginity as a concept shouldn't exist. If it exists as a concept, why is the burden only on one body type, one anatomical structure? Thirdly, like if it's very easy for me to say, okay, like you should say no to this and you should say no to that, but the fact is that it will really depend on the privilege that person is coming from, and by privilege I mean having information is privilege, right? Like a person would say no to a bad practice if they have the information that it's a bad practice. If they think this is like something everybody's done, my mom used to do it, my XYZ sister, elder sister's done it, someone else I know has done it, etc. How will they even know that it's not okay? This is a lot like in generations, menstruators don't go into the temple. Nobody questions it. They don't have the information. They just continue to follow the practice because that's how it's always been. Secondly, like you said, there's a lot of violence against people as well and violence against marginalized genders. So if somebody also knows this information, the fact that they'll be able to stand up for themselves and not have repercussions to it, there are lots of subsets. So maybe somebody has the information and they try standing up for themselves and they're beaten up for it, or they're abused for it, or they're emotionally abused for it, physically abused for it, whatever it is. So I think it's like simpler for us to say that, oh, like how should a you said how should a woman stand up for herself? So yeah, I think information lies at the bottom of it. And again, the information responsibility of having that information again can't be on just one particular group of people. Everybody should have that information. In fact, like abusers having that information is so much more important. Like somebody who's in a position of power who can possibly use that to abuse other people should have that information first almost, because that's the root cause of it, right? So I think that's why we keep on emphasizing on education, information, because a lot of things start from there. If you're able to understand information, if you have information about certain things, at least you'll be able to identify that it's not right. Once you're able to identify, the rest of it is also depending on empowerment. It also depends on, in a lot of relationships where there's skewed dynamics of money. Maybe one partner earns more, so they're in a position of power and they can leverage that for other things. So there, it's not black and white and it's not plain. Like I can't be like, oh, do this and it'll be fine. Sadly, but even then, having information is a great starting point.
So thank you, ma'am. That was the purpose for this session as well. That maximum people are reached out, especially men more than women. So everybody has the knowledge of what it actually is, and just maybe spread awareness as much as we can. So this misconception is put to an end.
Yeah, also,
Soon. So thank you,
yeah.
ma'am. It was a
And
great.
also as like medical professionals, this is our contribution that we want every girl, every parent or coming husband to know that what hymen is and how it works. We want them to know like what that the hymen can't be used as a proof of virginity assay. In that way, we can remove one of the most powerful tool used to control young women these days. Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your views regarding the hymen and the virginity and bursting out all the myths.
Great, no problem.
Thank you so much,
Likewise,
ma'am. We
thank
are
you so
honored to
much.
have you.
Thank you so much for having me here, and I hope this was helpful. And if anybody joined late, I'm sure they'll be uploading it on Instagram, so you can also
Yeah.
quickly watch just 20 minutes, 20.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much, ma'am.
so much.
Thank you.